So welcome. I'm glad you're here on this Eugenius day. And I don't want to drive you all off by talking about difficulty, pain, and death. So I'm glad you're here. But
What you got to do it anyway?
No, we're going to talk about it together. Because if I had to think of one constant for all of our lives, it's that things change, and that we all undergo challenge, and we all undergo pain, and we all have suffering. And the challenge we all face is how do we deal with it without letting it derail us, right? Okay, so one thing I said when I was introducing this at the beginning is if anybody has any thoughts or comments, just say them. Because sometimes it's fun to have a little discussion. I'm just going to go through my thoughts, and we'll figure it out together. Like I said earlier, sometimes I stand up here and I'm full of answers. Today, I'm not. Today, I have, Linda's laughing. It's like, oh God, can I come back when we have answers? No, today I have some questions because, you know, it's funny because I know that we are a New Thought community. And one of my gripes with New Thought is that sometimes it can be a bit mechanistic, I think. You know, sometimes it's like you think this way and this happens, there's a cause and there's an effect, and it's almost kind of Newtonian. But life is not like that. We live in the world of quantum physics now, and so we know that it's more complex, it's more interrelated. So my goal has always been to kind of marry up New Thought with the mystic tradition. Because I think that we don't find God until we step into the mystery. And sometimes when I find myself in just a New Thought environment, and it could be because I'm reading it wrong or I haven't found it yet, so back to my earlier invitation to shout it out. There's no mystery. But to me, a great deal of finding God and finding our place in the river that is God is just being able to rest in the I don't know, just to be able to look up and say, wow, and to be in the mystery of the presence of God. So I want to indulge in that a little bit today as we talk about how we handle difficulty and challenge. So Thomas Merton once said that we may spend our whole lives climbing the ladder of success, only to find when we get to the top of the ladder that it's been leaning against the wrong wall. Did you ever find that? Yeah, you ever find we're just leaning against? So today I want to talk about how we position our ladders and how we select our walls. But when we do that, when we get to the top and life is going as we think it should, it can be a terrifying and a disappointing day when we find out that life has thrown us a challenge that we're not ready for. We are shaken when we find out that after building what we call a life of success, a life of achievement, that we have instead focused on the shiny objects that are in front of us. And what we haven't done is we haven't given ourselves the toolkit to have the implements we need, to have the tools we need to get through tough times. We've been focused on the stuff, the success, the cars, the house, the money, the position, and we don't have the tools we need when life throws us something that just blows us away. We have no idea what went wrong. We have no idea what we should have done differently. We took all the messages that this is success, this is achievement, and instead we're left kind of wondering what happened. I know that I've been there, and I suspect that some of you have been there as well. So what I want to talk about today is how we deal with that and how we navigate our path without getting derailed when difficulties come up. It's funny because in New Thought communities like One World, we're so familiar with the tools that we are told to use for these opportunities. We examine our beliefs, right? We affirm our good. We don't give energy to the negative. We say we're not going to think about lack. We affirm the good. We see the possibilities. We affirm our wholeness. We refuse to believe that what might be lack or failure has any power over us. Those are all the tools we use, right? And they're good tools. And they help us change our mind because our mantra is change your mind, change your life, right? And those are tools that work. But what I do want to do today is look at them in a bit of a different lens. Those tools, to me, are the language of control. They're the language of I have this, I can do it. They're the language of if I change my mind, I will change my life. That's all I. That's the language of being able to do it all myself. And that is not always the case. I want to at least raise the question today. of whether we might find a realm of freedom and peace when we are forced beyond the place where we think we can control it all ourselves. Is this making sense? Because I think that's where the realm of freedom and peace and surrender are. It's kind of like Reverend Sidney was saying before. When we are able to step into the surrender, we also might be able to step into a place of greater peace. So my inspiration for what I'm talking about today, again, comes from Father Richard Rohr, who's a Franciscan priest and an author, and one of the most important writers in the Christian mystical tradition today. He runs a place called the Center for Action and Contemplation. You can get on his website. He's just great. I mean, I just love reading Richard Rohr, and if you haven't read him, R-O-H-R, get on his website and read a little bit today. The book I'm using is called Falling Upward, A Spirituality for the Two Halves of Life. Doesn't that make you just want to go out and read it? I mean, don't you ever just come across a title of like, wow, and then 50 pages you're into it, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm not sure I really grasp this. So you have to keep going. So what he teaches in that book is that most of us spend way too much time, for some of us all of our lives, on what he calls first half of life thinking. First half of life thinking. It's an interesting notion. You may not have heard it before, but it's an interesting idea. Dividing life up into the first and the second half, the first thing we have to know is it's not chronological. It's not you enter your second half of life when you're 40. It's an experiential division and an awakening division. Generally speaking, elders, folks who are older, are those who have embarked on the second half of life. But it's not just because they're older. It's because they've experienced more and they've grown into it. They've awakened into it. But having said that, younger people as well can be in the second half of life if they've had the experiences and the challenges that push them out of their little safe boat, that made them realize that there needs to be something that holds them up other than their own cognitive brain. So it's not a chronological division, but what it is you don't get there if your life has been easy. If you have always been in the driver's seat, you typically are not going to be there, because it's being out of the driver's seat that pushes you into that journey toward the second half of life. Okay, so what is first half of life thinking? It's the period of time in our lives when we focus on and we identify with security, identity, achievement. The preoccupations that we see in the first half of life are building a career, establishing our personal identity, career goals, success, professional identifications, the pursuit of wealth and position, attaching ourselves to significant projects or people, establishing our place in the community. We've all done that, right? That's what we do. When you leave home, you graduate from college or high school or whatever, that's what you do. You embark on first half of life preoccupations and first half of life pursuits. Father Rohr calls it, in this phase, we are all trying to find what Archimedes called a lever and a place to stand, so that we can move our world just a little bit. So there's nothing wrong with that. We all do it. It's what we teach our kids. We want them to get out and achieve. There's nothing wrong with first half of life thinking. The problem comes when we start to think that the first half of life is the main act. It comes when we fail to realize that it is the training round. It's the warm-up for the real part of life, which is the second half. In his book, what he says is that we need to be able to recognize when we need to move into the second half. And we need to have the courage to take that journey, because it is there with the wisdom and the peace that that second half provides for us, where we find the contentment and the harmony that comes with wisdom. We find the tools there to look at life's tragedies in the face and get past them in peace and without letting them completely throw us off the tracks. In the second half of life, we reach what he calls the far shore. Doesn't that sound great? Don't we all want to get there? To a place of contentment and peace and harmony, even when life is throwing us curveballs that we cannot possibly figure out how to manage. So in the first half of life, we are young, we are masters of the universe. We are unlimited, we don't think about death, tragedy, mortality. We just know we are going to live forever and the world is our oyster. We answer questions like, what makes me significant? Who will go with me on my journey? How do I support myself and my family? What we do in the first half, he says, is we create a life structure. We create a container for who we are. We learn rules, we learn strategies, we learn how to play the game. We create what he calls that container. We develop our healthy ego, because without it, we cannot move forward into the next phase. We create the image, our face. We create the image of us in the first half of life. And these occupations are necessary because we all know, what is it, the Dalai Lama said, you have to learn the rules very carefully because you have to know how to break them. So until we know what the rules are, we really can't move beyond them. People who remain arrested in the first half are those who never learn what the rules are. They're those who don't know how to operate because then they can't move safely beyond them. Those without a strong ego structure cannot move past it. So the lessons we teach and the lessons we learn when we are young are really important because we have to have that healthy structure to be able to move beyond it. The problem is many of us stop there. In our Western culture, we think that building a successful life is where we need to go. We think it's the reward at the end of the journey. And now we're retired. We're left to enjoy the fruits. We have a car, we have a house, we have success, we have position. Everybody knows who we are. We have a 4-page CV. We've arrived. We're successful. The tools of industry, compliance, hard work, and playing by the rules have worked, and we are set. Okay, but that's not always true. Because what happens when you're set? What always happens when you're sitting back and you think, well, things are going great, nothing's going to happen now. That divine 2x4, wham, comes, right? Comes and just hits you upside the head. It always happens. Because life is a journey, and the lesson we are here to learn is that when we think it's not going to change, that's when it does. Yeah, Linda's wearing a shirt that says life is a journey, not a destination. Did I tell you to wear that shirt? Yes. I should have put that on the front of the bulletin. Life is a journey, not a destination. Okay, so that divine 2x4, wham, upside the head. And what happens? You get illness, family disruption, job loss, natural disaster, some event that just shakes the foundation of your world. It just rocks your house beyond your ability to respond. Let me find our reading. What did it say in our reading? Some event, person, death, idea, or relationship will enter your life that you simply cannot deal with using your present skill set. Spiritually speaking, you are led to the edge of your personal resources. I've been there, and I'm guessing that many of you have been there as well. The toolbox you have no longer works. So what do? Even though the toolbox we have no longer works, it's the tools we have. What is it that if you only have a hammer, every problem is a nail? So we try to use the tools that we have. We call upon the tools of mastery, which made us so successful in our first half thinking. We outthink them. We have a disease, we out-Google it. We get on WebMD and figure out what's going on and how we can fix it. We don't want to seem weak, so we remain strong. We project that we have this, we can do this ourselves. I'm fine, don't worry about it. We'll take a few days off, and then we'll be great. Haven't you seen that? I remember when my father died, my mother died. What do? You take a week off and I'm good, don't worry about it. Yeah, so what do you need? What can I get you? It's like, are you on drugs? You know, these are major things that we need to usher ourselves gently through. And the tools of cognition, the tools of mastery, the tools of success do not always get you there. The first half of life tools do not answer the mail, always, when we come across these life problems. The first half of life teaches us, what does it teach us? Life is linear. Life is progressive. Life is up. We just keep going up. It's not like that. Life is, he compares it to a skater. Life is, how do you progress when you're a skater? You go side to side, right? You never go straight, you go side to side. And that's how it works. It's not always a smooth path. It is never always a smooth path. Sometimes it moves side to side and back and forth at the same time. We just have to kind of hold on and see where it's going because we cannot control it. It's not neat, predictable, or controllable as much as we would like it to be. But first half of life thinking gives us no frame of reference when life throws us this curveball. We're used to being masters of the universe, and now we're not. So what happens? We despair. We think we've lost our way, that our lives have somehow been derailed. However, we are wrong. And this is the clue that gets us into the second half, the broader spaces, the road where we can see the far shore. It takes such derailment to help us find what he calls our real life, which is our deeper life. It is this paradigm change that helps us weather life's challenges. What we have done, and this is where I'm going to ask you to stick with me, because this is the part where the questions show up more than the answers. I know you've been waiting for it. Okay. In the first half of life, what we do is we confuse our life situation, the structure we have built, the face we have built, with our real life, which is what he calls the underlying flow beneath everyday events. Do you sense when you are performing your life that there is really something deeper underneath it? That you're just kind of doing facial and surface things, but your real life is operating at a deeper and a more profound level. But when we're in first half of life thinking, when we're so busy building our structure, we don't have time to pay attention to it. We don't have time to live it or notice it or heed it. And it is these derailments, these life challenges that throw us off the path, that make us pay attention to what is our real life. Kate Bowler is an assistant professor of history in Christianity at the Duke University Divinity School. She's a historian of what is popularly called the prosperity gospel. We all know what that is, right? God wants to shower us with abundance, and so when we are rich or we are whatever, it means that God has blessed us. Okay, that's a shorthand for the prosperity gospel. She's the author of a book entitled Blessed, A History of the American Prosperity Gospel. She is a very entertaining writer. Her name is Kate Bowler, B-O-W-L-E-R, and I encourage you to read her. She's just great. So at the age of 35, she was diagnosed with an extremely rare cancer that at the time of her diagnosis was at stage 4. She had a loving husband, an infant son at home, a great career, a book deal, and the kind of unlimited plans you can only have when you're 35 and your life is structured like that. So you can imagine the progression of fears and emotions and terror she went through. She wrote an article for the New York Times called Death, the Prosperity Gospel, and Me. Great article that details her journey. In it, she wrote that she watched her friends try to impose an order and a logic on the situation that just was not there. It just was not there. They kept trying to make sense out of it in a way that might make them feel that someone was in control, when in fact, nobody was. She had moved into a place where she had no control, and there was no control to be found. She writes, "One of the most endearing and saddest things about being sick is watching people's attempts to make sense of your problem. They looked for order where there was none." She described a neighbor coming in. She's got all these prosperity gospel friends, so there's lots of opportunity to try to impose logic where there is none. She described a neighbor coming to her home, knocking on the door to tell her husband that everything happens for a reason. "I'd love to hear it," her husband said. And the woman was shocked. She goes, "Pardon?" And he said, "I'd love to hear the reason my wife is dying." Not a lot to say there. Because it's easy to say, there's a reason. And then when somebody says, "What is it?" that's when you move to, "I just don't know what the reason is." Because that's an easy answer. And what we're looking for today, what she was looking for, is a way to get beyond that. She wrote, "As far as she can tell from a medical perspective, bodies are delicate and prone to error." That's as far as she got. Bodies are delicate and they break down. Well, yeah, they do. And maybe that's the reason. She wrote that cancer kicked down the walls of her life. She could not be certain she would ever take her son to his first day of elementary school, or interrogate his future girlfriends, or finish the project that she loved. She writes, "Cancer requires that I stumble around in the debris of dreams I thought I was entitled to, and plans I didn't realize I had." Now that is being derailed. That's coming into contact with your real life, when you have been so focused on the structure you have built, and you don't get there until you go through something like that. She fell through the carefully created structure of her life situation and came face to face with the real thing. She also had new insights with this clarity. She wrote, "But cancer has also ushered in new ways of being alive. Even when I am this distant from family and friends, everything feels as if it is painted in bright colors. In my vulnerability, I am seeing my world without the Instagram filter of breezy certainties and perfectible moments. I can't help noticing the brittleness of the walls that keep most people fed, sheltered, and whole. I find myself returning to the same thoughts again and again. Life is so beautiful. Life is so hard." We don't say that a lot. We don't say that life is hard, but it is. And you don't step into the ability to deal with it until we realize and we admit that it is. We can't talk our way out of it. We can't affirm our way out of it. Sometimes, at the same time we realize that life is beautiful, we realize that life is hard. And there's no getting past it. Her illusion of control had to give way. She wrote, "At some point we must say to ourselves, I'm going to need to let go." And that's really the only way past it. And this is where we step into the idea of the mystery. I'm going to need to let go. When you let go, where do you land? Yeah, Sydney.
Because that's exactly when I was so sick 3 or 4 years ago. And here I was, critical condition, stage 4. All stage 4 cancer means it's spread.
Yeah.
That's all it means. And I've been stage 4 for 3 years. But the easy way out for me was I was getting ready to die. I thought I was getting ready to die.
Surrender.
And I surrendered, and then I found out I was supposed to live, and which is a harder option. I mean, I was just ready to go break beyond. I was all set. And then when the doctor said, "This is treatable," it was, like I said, it was like, oh crap. But what I found was that place where it didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
If I died or if I lived, it was either way, it was all right. And there's a power in that, because that's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
There's a power in that because then you're okay. You know, okay, it's okay if I die, it's okay if I live. And I will find a way to do both. And so I found a great peace and a great strength when I came to that realization that there was no, I'm not afraid of dying. I was more afraid of living. And I had to make peace with that. And once I did, then everything was fine. And I actually started getting better.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what you're right. That's what she writes. She writes that she found that place of peace when she realized that she had to give up her most precious gifts. Mm-hmm. And what she realized her most precious gifts was her family. And she could not come to that place of peace until she realized that she would have to give them up. And when she did, her paradigm changed. And it didn't mean she wanted to. It just meant that that's part of it. Richard Rohr writes, he talks about suffering, he has the concept called necessary suffering. And he gets that from Carl Jung. Carl Jung says so much of human suffering is caused because we don't recognize the need for necessary suffering. We run from suffering. But Richard Rohr says, and this is a quote, he goes, "Pain is part of the deal. Pain is just part of the deal." And we cause ourselves more pain and more suffering by continuing to deny that, instead of just recognizing that part of the wholeness. I mean, part of what he talks about is life is a cycle of living and dying. It just is. We can't tell ourselves that it's all an endless progression up. You know, we had the tomb before we had Easter. You know, we had the seed falling before we have the beautiful wheat. You know, it's just that cycle. And it's all part of the same thing. It's all part of the whole. And second half of life thinking comes when we are able to move beyond our focus on the particulars and on the separation into just the beauty of the whole. Even a whole that includes pain and suffering and loss. We don't go there willingly, and he talks about that. He says, we grow into the second half by leaving the comfort and familiarity of what we've constructed, the container we built and venturing into unknown places we don't know. And we only go when life has given us a boot in the rear end to get us there. Because who would leave home willingly? I mean, it's nice, you get fed, it's hot, there's nice TV, you got DirecTV, you got, Amazon. Who's going to leave that? We don't go until life boots us out. Kate Bowler could not have had that realization she had if she had not endured the suffering of her cancer diagnosis. We do ourselves a disservice, I think, when we attempt to run from that. Richard Rohr says, and he could be right, and this is one of my questions, is that we don't realize, we are not able to enter into the mystery and leave that first half of life container behind until something, and it may be suffering, it may be loss, pushes us out and pushes us into an appreciation that life is complex. It's both loss and renewal, death and resurrection, chaos and healing, all at the same time. It seems to be what he calls a collision of opposites. Even quantum physics tells us that. You know how quantum physics has moved us away from Newtonian cause and effect? Quantum physics tells us that something can happen here and have an impact across the world in ways that cannot even be measured by the speed of light. It's just not comprehensible using the old rules. We live in a web of interrelationships and intercauses, interbeing, Thich Nhat Hanh called it, which we just have to stand back and realize that we are part of without attempting to come up with a wiring diagram. Because wiring diagrams don't work anymore. And to the extent that we feel better by creating one and saying, that's life, we are just fooling ourselves. We are staying in that first half of life container and not getting to the release, the surrender, and the wisdom that we can get to when we just accept our part in it, even if we don't understand our part in it. I mean, that's why a good word for God is just mystery. It's something we don't get yet, with an emphasis on the yet. But that doesn't mean that we can't realize that it sustains us and supports us and loves us and holds us. We just can't maybe explain it all. That is the mystery. We open our lives up. We open our hearts up. And this is a very heart-based thing. When we permit ourselves to journey into this mystery, and it's okay. You said that dying was okay. Loss is okay. We are able to step back and say, it's all okay. And not let it throw us off, because we are part of that great mystery. She said when Kate Bowler was talking about her prosperity friend, she went around for years doing a history of megachurches, prosperity churches, where she said she would watch people, emaciated, sick people, being wheeled around churches where people are yelling that he was already healed. And what they didn't get was he might, yes, be healed, but he might still transition. That's the difference. He might be healed, but he might still leave this earthly plane. It's not the same thing. That's the difference between first stage and second half of life thinking. When you get down to the real depths of who you are instead of what you do, when you realize that your place is just flowing in that river of mystery, your heart just opens up to understanding that whatever happens, even though it's painful, it's still okay. And that is still a question for me. I can't explain it. I can't stand up here and give a wiring diagram. I just feel that that's the way it is. That is the way to peace and wisdom and some understanding on a deep level. Father Rohr writes, when you get your who am I question right, all the what should I do questions tend to take care of themselves. It just becomes part of the greater mystery of which we are all a part. It requires us to let down our walls and let down and give up our need to explain and understand and chart and control. We just don't have it. And you're going to find folks who will stand up here and say we do, but I don't think we do. And I think that's how we step into the mystery of our union with Spirit, of even our co-creation with Spirit. He writes, Whole people, whole, W-H-O-L-E, people see and create wholeness wherever they go. Split people, first half of life people, see and create splits in everything and everybody. In the second half, we take all the particulars and we see that they are part of the whole. By the second half of our lives, we are meant to see in wholes and no longer just in parts. Yet we get to the whole by falling down into the messy parts. So many times, in fact, that we long and thirst for the wholeness and fullness of all things, including ourselves. So this is not a clear path. You know, we're going to talk about this some more in the weeks that come. We'll take different looks at it. But I wanted to leave you today, really, with more questions than answers. Just things to think about. How this applies to you. Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? What does all this mean for you? My heart tells me that peace and healing can only be found when we let ourselves walk into the mystery, when we let ourselves fall into the mystery. It's no mistake that they call it falling in love, because we fall. We give up and we just fall. And the same is true with the mystery of spirit. We don't control it. When you're falling, you're not in control. You are just letting go. And that is the same thing that we do to get to the second half of life, understanding. We cannot think ourselves into wisdom or deep peace. We let go, we surrender, and we accept the wonder of it all, even the loss and the pain part of it. Because that is the flip side of the love and the wonder part of it. So what I'm going to do is take these thoughts into meditation.